And I can send you out to do social engineering. After today's class, you may want to try it. Don't get arrested. You may want to try it yourself. So malware is really that idea. It's a catch-all term. So it means anything that's going to happen to your computer of software that you didn't intend for it to happen. So whether it's an intentional, it's a virus or a worm, or it's a Trojan horse, or all these different terms we call something, it says it's a bad thing on your computer. Mal means literally means bad. So badware. So anything on your computer that's bad, this could be. So we look at it, and how we start to figure out what it can do or what it is by how it infected your computer. So if we think back to that video on the Stuxnet, how did Stuxnet infect a computer? Well, that Stuxnet, if we go back and we look at it, it was on a flash drive. The computers that were in there that were affected, that actually caused damage and slowed down production of uranium, were what we call air-gapped. They weren't on the internet. But at some point, this flash drives got around and it got infected, and it was used then to cross that air gap. So let me ask you, are there air-gapped systems around here that could do the same technique? So the control computers at Cooper Nuclear, are they connected to the internet? No, they are air-gapped. But if you got an infected drive and you managed to sneak it in there or get it in there accidentally or carry it in, could you infect those computers with something similar? Yeah. Most production power plants are air-gapped. Security at Offutt Air Force, a lot of it is air-gapped. Does that mean it's necessarily secure? No. So that's how it got into that system. So most of the new software is really, really sneaky. So not only does it get into your computer, it hides once it's there. So it changes its file name, so it's not a recognizable file name. It changes the process names. Great. And then we talk about the idea of payload, or what does it do? Great. So we tend to break them into two different categories, viruses and worms. So let's talk about viruses first, because that's the term everybody uses. And quite frankly, when you start hearing the word virus, what you're probably talking about is a virus or a worm. It's a term that gets its name, though, from how it behaves. It behaves like a virus in a biological population. Great. So there are a lot of different ways it reproduces on the same computer. So somehow it has to get sent to you. So maybe that's an email. Maybe it's because you're all sharing a drive. So a lot of times, this virus code is actually in an existing program, or a program that you really want. So if I just have an appender virus, it adds to the end of it. So one of the ways we check is we know how long Microsoft Word, for example, as a program should be. And we check. If it's longer than the length we think it is, somehow in that transmission, it's got something added to it. So there's a lot of software we can purchase, and there's websites we can actually modify existing software, add our own virus to it, and then redistribute it. So eyedroppers and several other different ways we can do that. Well, that's pretty ugly. And if it's at the end, it's fairly easy to do that. But what if I'm actually able to go into that code and embed it, bury it inside that code, not in one chunk, but in pieces? Well, hopefully I have a way to tell how that length is, or some other way to see what it's doing. So they're scrambled, they're in different parts, sometimes they're in different programs. So until you download Microsoft Word, and maybe you went out and got the latest version of a PDF reader, it isn't actually there because it's in little pieces and it's scrambled among multiple things. Some viruses sit there and change. So we have the idea that they're inside your computer. Now they change names, they change locations. Great. Just like a real virus. So these guys are pretty sneaky. And these writers of these are getting more and more creative. And they're trying to figure out ways. So this is very technical. So in this case, we have a virus code that's in 5 or 6 or 10 or 100 different locations. So here we have where it's split into different pieces. We may have them, again, like in different programs. So typically, this computer then will be infected, and that virus wants to do something. And so what that action is, it could be deleting all your files. But that doesn't generally generate revenue. What generates revenue is doing things like redirecting where your computer goes on the internet, so that when you type in, I want to buy a new computer, Best Buy may have put a virus on your computer that always goes to Best Buy's website instead of going to Google. So those are the kinds of things it can do. So viruses are almost always attached to another file, and they cannot automatically spread to another computer. That's one of the differences. We'd think they are, but it has to have some user action, we think. It has to usually have a user action of some sort to be able to change. A worm then, worms, kind of the idea is a worm will oftentimes spread itself. So it copies itself across the network. Now, quite frankly, should these terms maybe be reversed? It happens. But worms then come across the network. And when I say a network, I don't necessarily mean just all these computers in this lab that are connected. I mean the World Wide Web, which is one big network. So worms can often insert viruses or other files that are going to do bad things. They replicate, and in some cases, all I have to do to get a worm in my computer is for me to sit there and have that computer connected to the World Wide Web, and bam, I'm infected. So this is kind of a shortcut for differences. So does it infect a file? A virus does. Yes, a worm stands alone. I guess you could look at it that way. And a virus typically needs some kind of user action to do something. Then we have a couple of other ones we want to talk about. So if we go back into history and we talk about a Trojan horse, what was the original Trojan horse? Does anybody remember from history? What was a Trojan horse? Got it. Peloponnesian War, is that right? Yeah. So they hid inside of this gift, and then they did something different. That's that idea of a Trojan horse. A Trojan will allow you to hide inside of it. So examples of this. So we may go find a program on the internet that sounds like it does everything we want to do. The most common ones I see are screensavers here lately. So that screensaver, you go download this screensaver or whatever tool it is, and inside of that code is hidden files that are going to do something bad. So maybe it scans your computer for where you've been on the internet and sends that back, because that's valuable data. Maybe it scans your computer to see if you've ever been at a banking site and if you've saved your credentials. That's even worse. There are even ones, so you're going to see this term quite a bit, RAT, remote access. So we saw on the video the two guys at Symantec showing you what a RAT was. So in other words, you could get remote control. That happens a lot. The FBI even says, if you have a computer that's got a web camera on it, what do they recommend you think you should do? Put a piece of black tape on it. There's little shutters, we've given them away, because it is entirely possible that your computer can be controlled, and that can turn on things like a camera without you knowing about it. In fact, when you guys were in high school, since a lot of you just graduated not too long ago, you can think back to those terms. If you had a one-to-one computer initiative in school, and you got a computer, do you think the administrators of that program could probably turn on that webcam on that computer? Yeah. And it's one of the vulnerabilities we see a lot. So I'm going to recommend that if you have a computer that's got a webcam, put some tape over it. It's pretty easy, a little piece of black tape. Or get one of those sliders so you can turn it off and on. So the next type, this we are seeing all over the place. Every day we can go out and find cities, utilities, businesses, hospitals, people that have gotten something called ransomware. The developers of this are using this like a business. They're treating it like a business. What they are doing is in some way you are getting something on your computer, whether it's email, whether it's a drive-by infection, however you get it there, you are getting a notice on your computer that says, hey, in 100 hours or 50 hours or whatever time they set, all the files on your computer are going to be scrambled and you are not going to be able to get them back unless you pay the money to me. When you pay the money, I will give you that encryption key to unlock your files. So, that is really, really common. You can literally find examples every day of places getting attacked. Now, can I get my files back without paying? If you have backups, you are going to lose some data, but it's better than paying a fee. And in some cases, those fees have went from hundreds of dollars to thousands to now in some cases they've asked for over $1 million for some places to get that data back. So there's some other variations of this. There's some weirdly guys that are going after these guys with fake ransomware that'll come up just you'll accidentally go onto a website that you went to the wrong page because you typed Google with an extra O or something strange. And it says, oh my goodness, you need to call this number to get tech support. And they're extorting you that way because they say, well, you have a ransomware on your computer. But for $649, we'll remote into your computer and you need to purchase this software from us. Or we'll let you remote in and we'll install this software. There is no end to the amount of people and the people willing to do that. And in fact, if you think you have something on your computer and you just search, I need an anti-malware tool, about half of the ones you're going to show up are fake. They're just wanting to get your money. Great. It really is all about money. So this is an example of that malware. This is one of many, many variations that says, oh my goodness, your computer has been hacked. You have X number of hours. So there's some variations of this. So I have seen ones that say, we have found that you have child pornography on your computer. If you don't pay us this much, we're turning you into the FBI. Now, if you throw out enough of those, are you going to hit somebody who's probably guilty and going, oh my God. So, do I have anybody from Falls City in here? Oh, I do. All right, hopefully they're not a relative of yours. So, I do some work with the city of Falls City, and in fact, I was in the police department putting in some network equipment last fall some point. And you probably know Bailey Armbruster. So Bailey's my niece. The chief of police used to be my brother-in-law. Now we're divorced, so I still claim him. He's a pretty decent guy, whatever. And I'm in there doing something, and he comes in and he grabs me and he says, you gotta come help this guy. So this gentleman, mid-70s probably, had wandered into the police department and had gotten one of these. And it said basically that he was going to go to prison and that they had pictures of him on like webcam sites and that if he didn't pay so much money that he would be arrested. And they also had his password and all these things. They had a fairly long list. But we'll talk about it eventually where we get them. So the police chief had me go talk to this guy and explain to him that no, you probably should go change all your passwords. Probably I'd wipe your computer and restart. A, stay off of the websites because that's where you got some of this from, but B, it's all a hoax. So I got to actually experience that. But the fact that it was a 72-year-old grandfather-y looking guy was a little disconcerting to me. So, and I didn't know him, so I can't tell you if he's related to you or not. You don't have a 72-year-old grandfather-looking guy in your family, do you? Okay, that's good. But it happens. There's things happen, and I got to see that then live. The fact that he went to the police department to try to self-report himself, I'm not really sure where that was all going from. But it does happen. You are going to get attacked. So this is another kind of ransomware. So this one pops up, and this one was fairly common. Now they've changed it to Windows 10, obviously. And it pops up on your screen, and it says, I've got all these things that are infected, and if you buy my software right now, I'll remove them off your computer. Do you really have anything on your computer that's infected? Does that software you're going to buy do anything other than you just gave them the ability to install software that can remote control your computer? No. So the last option of that is it pops up with a phone number and you call them and they actually give you a number, and sometimes you can actually call them back, which is really even weird. They keep that number around long enough, you can actually call them back and have a set of interactions, and they say they'll remote in on your computer. And there's a lot of remote control tools, and we'll look at some of them. And they get on your computer and they start installing their own software and their own. So once you let somebody have access in there, would you ever trust that computer again? But it happens, and it's a kind of a third variation. I had one that I got a call, again last year actually, and I got a call from a woman's caregiver. She was an older woman who had a computer, and they had actually gotten to her the first time. And the first time they wanted about $600 to clean her computer up. And then a couple months later, suddenly she had another infection, and they started calling her. So not only did her computer pop up, but they actually called her because they had her number now. They said, well, we see a mark for $600, and they got about $2,000 out of this woman for a computer. Now the reality is she's on a Walmart $349 computer. None of this made sense. So the third time, one of the people at this particular place called me and said, hey, can you come help us with her? And they were actually wanting $5,000 out of this woman now to clean up her, even worse. And they were telling her all kinds of things about her computer was infected and that it was distributing child pornography. They're very good at this idea of social manipulation. So they combine technology, social manipulation, and hey, we're getting $5,000 out of this lady. And she's willing to mail them a check or whatever else. One of the other tip-offs, if they're wanting things like Apple cards or iTunes cards, or they want you to go to the Walmart and get the green card and send them money, that's probably a scam, right? But they're really, really, really good at what they do. So this social engineering piece comes in, and they are super good. CryptoLocker, and so this is finally that last piece. This is where they're actually encrypting your software. And so here's an example of what it looks like. This is one of them. They've all changed, but usually they have a countdown, and it'll say and while it's counting down, what this program doing is running, is sitting there and it's taking one file at a time, and it's scrambling it. So the first thing, if you see this on something or somebody tells you they have this, unplug every goddamn computer in the network right then and there. Because, and I notice I say unplug, not just turn off. Because here's one of the fun new things they've figured out how to do. Most computers will respond to a wake-up request from the network. They have figured out how to tap that, and so even if you just push the power button, they're able to, and in some cases, turn the computer back on. So it's a new fun thing. Now, we use it for remote control. I use it in here to turn these computers on and off, well, when we get our network back again, working again. But they have got a really great idea. So pull the network cable, pull the power plug, call some professionals, because you are probably in trouble if you've already seen this. If you see that and it's counted down much, you've lost a lot of files. And it happens fast. And if you're in a business and you're sharing files across the network, every file that you have access to or a shared drive could be encrypted at that point. And it can get pretty ugly very quickly. This has cost businesses hundreds and millions of dollars to repair. Baltimore, has everybody heard of the city of Baltimore? Baltimore spent now $25 million to try to fix the damage from crypto malware. Now, a little of that is, guess what they're also burying in there? They're saying, oh my God, the computer's destroyed. We have to buy a new one for our office. So they're using that as a way to generate some new computers. And it's also right now, so the timing of it's interesting because Windows 7 licensing is expired. So they would have had to pay to upgrade or buy a new computer anyway. So I think some of that's getting fluffed up a little bit. But it's expensive. It's expensive. If you have backups, you can actually recover from this. So a lot of the places I do some support and some consulting work, we take snapshots every 15 minutes of every file on that network. Well, in worst case, you call me immediately, I can probably get it where you don't lose hardly anything. If you call me 3 days later, well, you've probably lost everything you've created in those last 3 days at a minimum. But this is one of them that we are seeing a lot of, and there's variations of it. They are running it like a business. They will, in most cases, if you're willing to pay, give you a key so you can unlock your data. They want customer service, right? They want to make you happy. But it also behooves them, if you're willing to pay today and that news gets out that you paid and got your data, the next victim is going to be willing to pay also. And then last we have this thing, and you've probably heard, oh my goodness, my phone got rooted, my computer got rooted in some popular movie. Well, rootkits are designed to install and be very, very hidden. They're hidden typically below an operating system. So the operating system doesn't know that this file is in here. Oh. So it hides kind of we call it ring 0. So it's the lowest level of that computer. It's above or below, however you want to think about it, the operating system. It controls the operating system. It tells the operating system, nope, there's no files here, you can't see them, and it can run on your computer. So rootkits are kind of one of the ultimate ways that we can exploit a computer. If I can get it rooted, you can wipe out your operating system and reinstall it, and guess what? It's still there. And in fact, we have some new versions of rootkits that are even sneakier. So when your computer first boots up, you know that black screen, and it probably scrolls a little bit and tells you about something. So we typically called it BIOS. Now the newest ones are called UEFI and different. But it's the very instructions in a computer, in a hard-coded chip for the most part, that tell the computer what's plugged into it and how to interact with the software. So it is the very lowest level. Well, now we have rootkits that actually will modify that. In most cases, the only way to get rid of those is to throw away the motherboard or pull a chip and replace it with a chip from the manufacturer if it's available. That's pretty creepy. You've got it on there. It doesn't matter if you take the hard drive out, it's still on there. So rootkits hide at the lowest level. If you ever hear me complain about Sony, so here's an example of that. Notice it says rootkit files. Your operating system can't even see they're there. There is no way in most cases to see that they're there. So our friend Sony, has everybody heard of Sony? Large company. But they make movies, and they were very concerned that you might take that movie, put it on your computer, and make a copy of it and give it away for free, and they weren't going to get $1. So they had some interesting plans. You would buy a movie, and in some cases, some of their video game software and other things, you put it in your computer, and it actually contained a rootkit. And it would actually root your computer directly from Sony. Thank you. And you signed up for that. That is why I do not have Sony equipment on any of my stuff, because I thought that was a very questionable practice. I may have chuckled a little bit when they got hacked by the South Koreans and lost millions of dollars, because if they're willing to do that, they're doing the same thing they're now yelling about other people, right? So that was their way to control that, digital rights to control that, was to infect your computer. Oh, sadness all around. So what kind of things can all these payloads do? So it can obviously gather up everything that's on your computer and about you. It could delete data. So maybe we write it because we're mad at Peru State College. They didn't give me my diploma because I didn't pass 122 hours. I'm going to send them a virus or some form of payload, and it's going to delete all the registration files for everybody that's attending Peru. That'd be very destructive. It may modify security settings so that other software can be installed or can get in there. It may also control that computer to the point that you're launching attacks against other ones. So you may want to control every computer on Peru State's campus so we can do a variation of that ping attack, but from every computer on Peru. And if we get Peru, well, then we're going to get Wayne and Chadron and UNL, and maybe we can get every state and college in the state and university, and they're all attacking, pick a target, the Department of Defense. Maybe they're trying to take down the Department of Defense. So those payloads can be fairly benign. Yeah, it changed your security setting. Maybe something else got in. Here's one of them that we see a lot. the idea of something called spyware. So spyware gets on your computer. There's value in where you go, where you shop, what you do. So spyware handily reports back and tells you where you're at. And in a lot of cases, we install spyware. So we put on that free calendar program, we put on that toolbar, we put on that screensaver, and buried in there was a little thing that says, hey, I allow this company to take data off my computer. Chunk. And we put it in there. Ooh. We do that to ourselves in a lot of cases. We have actually done it to computers in here, trying to get programs that we thought were very valuable. And when you're reading all those things when you install it, if you don't read them, sometimes you can get surprised and you will install some drive-by spyware. Ooh. Adware is really like what it says. So adware says, all right, I'm going to exchange ads on my computer for something valuable. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So spyware, pretty icky, but there's something even worse. There's something called a keylogger. So keyloggers, not only can they take over your computer and do other things, but they record every keystroke that you put on a keyboard. When you do that, can I search for things like your password? Yeah, I can search for things that look like a pattern of credit card numbers, other information. If I can put a keylogger on your computer, I can get everything you do. And some keyloggers are actually physical, so they intercept the keystrokes. So they look about this size. So it may be a USB plug in the back of your computer. It may be one that's a daisy chain. So this plugs in and then the keyboard plugs in. Those are really hard to detect because there's no way to see what's going on in there. So keyloggers can be useful. So this is kind of that idea. There's hardware versions. It can be software. So if I'm a police officer investigating a meth lab, could I use a keylogger to obtain information? Maybe. What about if I'm getting a divorce and I want to get information about my soon-to-be ex-wife? Has that happened a lot? Yeah. And in most states, that's actually illegal, and you'll probably spend some time in the local hoosegow or possibly some prison time for doing that. But does it happen a lot? But there is a group that we do this all the time to. And it's legal. Because they're our own little progenies. Who do we put? Your own children. You can buy spyware software for their phone and their computer so you can see everything they type, where they go, and everything they do. It's legal if your relationship with your child is to the point where you have to spy on them that badly. There might be some other issues, but I will say, having had some experience in the foster care world, and my wife having experience with foster care children she got at age 10, some of that software was very useful to try to identify where the runaway child was. So there's some things that are good about it, but the reality is, most of the time it's bad. I install that when I try to hack you, though. That's one of the great things I try to do. Because if I can get all your passwords, I can embarrass you when I find out that your password is password123. Or the @ symbol for A, or some of these things that we think are really secure are not. And we're going to talk a lot about how insecure passwords are. Because remember, what are passwords? False and security, but there's a phrase we're going to use on our final. Passwords are, yeah, there you go. Hopefully that didn't come over the video. So, passwords are BS, and we know that. We know that. But if I don't want somebody in my network, keystroke loggers are kind of creepy. And so here's an example of one. I used to actually have you guys do that as an example, and I got in a little bit of trouble with that. So there's some of these that have actually, they will allow you to install the software temporarily for free. And so I had people do that, and it freaked out a lot of people that we could actually do that. So we no longer do make you install or have you install a software logger as an example. But some of them will actually, you can put in key phrases, and you can actually come back and send those back. So similar to that, we used to have one of those in the house. So I played around with a lot of security, and so we have a Falsidian. She may know. Now he's old now. So I have a stepson, Caleb Gilkerson. You don't know him? Good. You're like, oh, I hope not. And no, Caleb's a good guy, but some of his friends, not necessarily. So in high school, we had him over, and I didn't realize they were up in one of my computer labs at the house. Oddly, I have a lot of computers at my house, and all of a sudden, my alert went off that there were some sexually suggestive words being typed in this thing. So I was doing some playing around. So high school, I think they were sophomores. One of Caleb's buddies was up in one of my computer labs having a sex chat with a girl from Dawson. He was very embarrassed when I printed it out downstairs and walked upstairs to go, hey, this is what you've been talking about. Maybe you should get out of my computer lab. He didn't want to stick around for breakfast the next morning. So, just another example of where it was. And I was actually setting that up for a client. We were going to do some stuff, and he just happened to think, oh, there's an open computer in this room. I'm going to go in. Yeah, it was sad. So this is that idea of the hardware logger, and I have one, wherever it is up here, that I just plug in. So this one's hard to detect. The computer really has a hard time detecting it because it just grabs them as it passes by. The downside to this one, or the one I plug in, is I have to retrieve the data manually somehow. So here's what I tend to do. The lowest paid employees in your building tend to be the custodial staff, right? Hey, $100, you go plug this into that computer in the back of it in the office. Do they have access? Do they want to make $100? They're not going to. Oh, that sounds like a challenge. Oh, your boss Jonathan and I are going to have a little workout there. So one of my students is actually working in a hospital. They may need some penetration testing. I may have to work on them and see if they want to hire a penetration tester. I got this very one installed in a bank for $100. $100. Nope, was not Fall City. Was not Auburn. Was not anywhere in this state. And it was in a much larger community. So small towns actually are a little harder for this for janitorial services. The bigger cities all use these janitorial services, and their employees come and go pretty quickly. A lot of them are a little on the shady side. Small towns, it tends to be somebody's grandma's up there cleaning the bank. It's a little harder to do that. But yeah, this guy's been plugged in for $100 before, right into a computer, and then I have, in this particular case, I had complete access to everything they typed. Now, again, I was doing that with the express permission of the owners of the bank. It wasn't as though, and no, I actually told him what was going on. So there's a little more to that too. And I said we were doing it. So I set him up a little bit. But if he's going to do it for $100 and he's not quite sure if it's legal or not, I'm going to guarantee if I walked in and just said let's do it for $200, he'll probably do it, right? Yeah. People respond to, especially people that need money very, very badly. So adware. And adware is kind of an odd thing because I don't mind sometimes getting things for free if I get a little service. So my Kindle. Does everybody know what a Kindle is? If you don't have one, it's an ebook reader. I bought mine from Amazon, and when it's not turned on, it displays an ad on the screen. And I don't really care. It's not horrible, but I know I'm making that trade-off. It's got an ad for the fact I got it $10 cheaper. So the same way with software, in a lot of cases, we think, oh my goodness, it's going to display an ad to me every now and then. It's not that bad. The problem is some of them get a little over enthusiastic about how often they display ads. They may also think, hey, if you're willing to do this, or you're willing to put some other software on your computer. So you do have to be a little cautious. Unwanted advertisements can be annoying. Now, I will say this. There's an interesting thing going on in Florida at some of the large community colleges that are all banded together. They, instead of providing internet to the students, they actually contracted and get revenue from a company that says, we'll offer Wi-Fi to all of your students. And with that, every 12 or 15 minutes, I think it's every 12 minutes, you get a pop-up on your screen for an advertisement. But the college makes some money, and the students said, hey, we're willing to do that. Just like it's just an ad pops up, and you can usually minimize them pretty easily. But in exchange for the college saving quite a bit of money, so in terms of dollars, let me throw this out here. We know Peru State College, the size of it, it's not huge, right? So when they initially did the wireless a couple of years ago, that's in place now, it was about $550,000 for the wireless upgrades that they did. That's a lot of money. If I came into you and I said, all right, I'll tell you what, Peru, I'll give you $5,000 a month, and you don't have to pay for the internet or the bandwidth, and your college students all get free Wi-Fi. Do you think that would be an interesting trade-off? I would, and that is what has happened in a lot of states. You're willing to trade a little bit of privacy, a little bit of your time for a benefit. And we all do it. It's just in what varying degree do we do that. So, unwanted advertisements. And then, of course, they can do things like delete data. And so you'll see this term. It depends. So different advertisers collect different amounts. So a lot of if you don't click through an advertisement, it's not worth anything. Those that click through are worth like a percentage of a penny. So the reality is Peru's not a target for that. But if you have, so in Florida, it's hundreds of thousands of students at a community college and everybody on that college. So it's a much bigger market. So the reality is that nobody's going to do that for Peru. I mean, we're such a small blip on the radar that it's not really going to happen. So it's just an example. We do the same thing though. So one of the things we do trade. How many of you paid for your Google Mail account that you use here at Peru? Oh, it is free. Huh. How is it free? Google has to put servers up. They have to build infrastructure. They have support. They have all those software they built. How is Google Mail free at the college level? Why would Google want to say, here, colleges, use our email for free and give you the Google Docs and give you all that? So you graduate, you go, man, I'm used to that Gmail suite. I'll use it. So they do take them away when you graduate. So so it is, and what the other thing that they do is they do scan your email.
I swear they don't, because I still have. They really do.
At some point. Now, historically, they've been really bad about pulling that email account right away. It's not when you graduate that day it stops. But I think like once a year they kind of do a purge of this. There are. And I actually approached them about. So there are schools that will give you an email address for life. But Google's trading that. Why they're providing that service is their claim is they will not look at individual emails, but they will look at them in bulk. So they'll look at all the .edu addresses, and they scan through it, and they can see what things are trending, what things are going on. My guess is if you start sending emails about buying a new television, you're going to get inundated with Google ads. I don't think it's as non-granular as what they say. No, it's free. They really do give it to us for free. You don't pay for the email. The college doesn't pay for the email. Google provides it for free for the ability to look at some of your data and for the ability to give you a little bit of advertising. Microsoft will do the same thing. So our two sister colleges at Chadron and Wayne use Microsoft, same kind of deal. But the reality is anything really free? No. If you've driven by they have spent over $1.5 billion in Council Bluffs on the data centers there alone. Somebody's paying for it, and it's really you guys. You just don't realize yet how that's happening. So one of the things I'm going to recommend when you get out of college, it doesn't cost a lot of money once you get a big boy or girl job, is to get your own email address with a verifiable provider, or buy, in some cases, your own domain and use a provider. So I have a couple of email addresses that I own. I own the server that it sets on. I'm like Hillary Clinton. I own the server that it's on. So that it is mine. Can it still be data mined? Probably, but it's a little harder. Do I use Google Mail because it's handy and convenient? Yes. So, but again, you're trading off convenience for security. So all of those things are in there. The reality is your data is also owned by the college. So when we had an event on campus for security a couple of years ago, when we had an issue with there was a stabbing and some other issues on campus, did they search through student email? Yeah, and they have that ability to do that. When you get a corporate email address, can they scan through that? Yeah, and in fact, most of them will tell you right when you're in there, don't put your own personal things in there. And yet every year somebody does something dumb. A couple of years ago, they were looking for a superintendent for Omaha Public Schools. Do you guys remember this? If you didn't hear about this, this is really crazy. So they were going to hire a woman as superintendent of the public schools. The newspaper did a Freedom of Information request from the previous school she was at in Iowa. She was going to be the superintendent, $250,000 a year plus. When they did that Freedom of Information Act and got her old emails because they had heard a rumor and a tip, this woman was having an affair with a coworker or somebody else, I don't really know who, and it's not germane, but she was describing in graphic details what they were going to do in her work email address. It was exposed, and they retracted the offer. So now she's quit her job, and she would have been fired after that probably anyway, and you didn't get the $250,000 a year job. Talk about a kick in the teeth, all because you couldn't go out and get the free Google email address, right? Kind of sad. So the last thing I want to talk about really quickly is something called a logic bomb. So a logic bomb is part of that payload of some kind of malware. It sits there until it's triggered. So it could be triggered by an event, it could be triggered by time. And it's not a bomb in the sense that the computer explodes and little shrapnel goes everywhere. But it's a piece of that program that when that is triggered does something. Maybe it starts deleting files. Maybe it starts scrambling files, manipulating stuff. It's something that's set in there. So some very unsavvy people have said, I'm going to get hired, and I wrote right into that software code, I wrote a logic bomb. And when it is triggered, because I got fired, I can't go in and update it and change that date out anymore, it's going to wipe out every file on this company's data store. So that's where we're kind of headed. So, all right, I'm going to stop this recording, and I have a video